us is that we must transform our view of work. That's ultimately what it's telling us. There are two false views of work that this passage is debunking, and we see them all throughout our culture today. The first one is live to work, and the second one is work to live. And you probably ascribe to one or the other of those two ideals in our culture. There are two traditional worldly points of view on work. You either work to live, which is your work is ultimately drudgery that you put up with so that you can gain the resources from your employer to do the things that you want to do. In other words, you're living for Friday. Or you live to work. Work is the purpose of life. I get all of my affirmation. I get my self-actualization from what I accomplish in my work. I live to work. And nothing can get in the way of my work. Work to live or live to work. But ultimately, both of those propositions, both of those ways that the world looks at work are both equally misguided. Either you're working so that you can get enough so that you can do things to get your whole, so that you can do things, or you're getting your whole worth out of your work. Let's deal with them. The first false view. Let's deal with this one. Work to live. Work to live is the belief that work is a curse and that leisure is the meaning of life. I think I might ascribe more closely to that one myself. To combat this idea, Paul tells us that you should be doing work as if it's the will of God. You should be doing it from the heart, he says. Doing the will of God from the heart, rendering service with goodwill as to the Lord and not to man. Paul says, your work isn't about you, not at all. And you have to face that. You have to see your work in terms of your relationship with God, which is diametrically opposed to the false view, which says God is a cosmic killjoy, and the only reason why work exists is because God just wants me to be miserable. If God is out of the picture, then leisure could be your meaning of life, but because he requires work, now I've got to work. I just wish we could just live to have fun and eat, drink, and be merry. I've known people that live that way. Work is just a necessary evil so that you can have the resources that you want to live the way you want. In that view, there's no joy in work or in accomplishments. None whatsoever. There's no pleasure in good work at all. That just doesn't matter. It's a non-starter for people that ascribe to that side of things. All I'm doing is getting enough dollars so that I can do the things that I want to do, which means that there's no pride in work. And as a result of people that live that way, maybe you've experienced this if you work with them in any length of time, there's no quality in the work either. And when there's no quality in the work, that means that everyone suffers. Nobody wants a doctor who's a brain surgeon. You need brain surgery, and you find out your brain surgeon is just living for Friday. You're not going to get good service. You're not going to get, who knows, you may not survive your surgery. Which means everyone suffers. All of society suffers when there's poor quality in workmanship. We do. Just think of the 1980s car industry. We all had to live. It was horrendous. Does anybody think of any of those 80s cars as classics today? I don't know. Are any of them still on the road? I have no idea. Quality was so bad, though, right? All of society suffers from poor quality of workmanship, from scarcity, because, hey, if a farmer says, hey, I'm only living for Friday, guess what? They're not farming as much. Everybody suffers in our society from a lack of care. I use the example of a brain surgeon, but if in nursing care, if the nurse is just living for Friday, guess who's not getting quality care? You, if you're in her care. See, this is the outcome when there's no pride in work, when there's no joy in it. If you don't have pride in your work, you don't see yourself as a servant to anybody. Not your employer, not the people buying the widget, not the people being served by your service, and certainly not God. Because being a servant means that you have to work to somebody else's standards. Why do that? if all you're doing is trying to get enough money so that you can go do the things that you want to do? I'm going to get paid anyway, so why not cut corners? I'm going to get paid the same. As long as I can get away with it, I will. So you're working strictly for the short term, and you're and getting paid so that the real interests, the real values, the real priorities of your life can get served. And ultimately, what that means is that you're exploiting your employer when you do a poor job. Now you have to understand, the idea that work is a curse that must be endured is actually not a Christian ideal. You may not be aware of this. Christianity does not teach that work is a curse. That's actually Greek and Roman philosophy at work in your life, if you think that work is a curse. See, work is a curse that comes from classical Greek and Roman philosophy. Do you remember the story of Pandora? Pandora is the Greek mythological reason for why all of this evil and pain and suffering exists in the world. Pandora finds a box that has all the evil stuff in it, right? Pain, suffering, all that stuff is in there, and Pandora opens the box. And what comes out? All of that stuff. Guess what's in that box? Go read it for yourself. It's right there in the story. Work is in that box. Did you know that the Latin word for work is negotium, which actually means, literally translated, means non-leisure? They couldn't actually call it its thing. They had to call it by what they didn't want it to be, or what they wanted to be, leisure. They defined it by that. And when you see negotium all over Roman poetry, it infers pain and trouble all the time. See, in Roman culture, work is a curse. And the best thing that you can do if you had the means was to get away from it. So if you were wealthy, you did not work. Instead, you got slaves. Aristotle and Plato both said, if you have to work, make art or music, do philosophy or politics, but don't get dirty doing work. It's hard for me to believe that we held up those people as paragons for Western thought for 2,000 years. Thank goodness, thankfully, the Enlightenment happened and people like John Locke actually read their Bibles and found out, hey, work is actually a good. We should incent people to work. Because the Bible tells us that work has been there from the beginning. Genesis 2:15, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. You and I were created for work. We were created to create, to cultivate, to care for, to maintain, to serve something, to garden, if at the very least. So get your hands dirty. You're made in the image of God who loves to create. That's work. You're made in the image of God who loves to take things and bring the best out of them. That's also work, another form of work. Your model in life is Jesus Christ. That's who we're following, by the way, as disciples. Make sense? Your model is Jesus Christ, who came to serve and not be served. See, throughout the Bible, throughout Old Testament and New Testament, you see tremendous dignity is given to work. Work isn't the result of sin. If there was no sin in the world, there would still be work, and I suspect that we're going to work in heaven. Because you and I were built to work. And there can, I know you don't believe this, some of you, there can and there should be joy in it, in your work. There can be fulfillment there. So the biblical understanding is that work became full of meaninglessness, became full of toil because of sin. Work was created by God as good, just like man and woman were created by God as good. And guess what happened? Sin came into the world, and the good thing got cursed. Look at what it says. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. And you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread. They were created to be gardeners, and now all of their gardening is going to be toil and pain and suffering. Work has been cursed. But it's not a curse. It's an important distinction to make. Which means that no matter how good you are, no matter how good your work environment is, you're always going to find thorns coming up. Don't go into it naively thinking if I follow Jesus, then everything is going to be great. He did say there would be suffering when you follow me. But there's going to be frustrations in your work because of the curse of sin. So we don't work to live.